Hello, Magic Commander players! Are you ready to rock? If so, then let's talk about Thraximundar. So before we get into today's deck tech, let's talk a little bit about what makes a theme deck for me. I break it down into two different categories. My cards in this deck that you'll see are not going to be optimized. They're not going to be the CEDH version of whatever a Thraximundar deck could be. They're going to be trying to fulfill both form, the artistic, the flavorful, to evoke the sense of a metal band on the road, touring, pounding away, trying to get fame, and also functionality. So I do want to draw cards, I want to play lands, I want to beat people eventually, hopefully, but that is not my primary goal. My primary goal is to meet somewhere in the middle. I want to have a deck that lets me tell a story, and also a deck that lets me play and potentially win a game here and there. Without further ado, here is the band itself. Thraximundar is your lead singer. He's a legendary zombie assassin, a 6/6 hasted creature that comes in, and whenever it attacks, defending player sacks a creature. Whenever a player sacks a creature, you can put a +1/+1 counter on Thraximundar. And you definitely do, because this is a Voltron kind of deck. Next up, we have lead guitarist, the Scarab God. Now, this doesn't fulfill 100% form, because it's not the most flavorful card, but I think it squeaks in, because if you remember the 80s, like I do, because I'm ancient, there was so much Egyptian symbology and sort of stuff in metal at that time that I thought I could squeak by with putting a scarab reference in the deck. Next up, we've got Marchesa the Black Rose. There's an awesome, goofy metal movie called Black Roses, and also there's a history of fantastic female bass players in metal, and so I thought she kind of fits all of those categories. And also she has this great ability that when a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So this allows Thraximundar to have some recursion, because he's usually going to have a counter on him, and so if somebody tries to get rid of him, she brings him back. Last, we have the sort of percussion of the band. We have the keyboardist and the drummer. We have Nin the paint artist. She's into some weird stuff, as you can see by the picture, but also it's a strange and funny way for me to draw cards throughout the game, because Thraximundar is such a big butt that she can kind of jolt him with that electricity and pull some cards out of nowhere. Last, we have Angrath, Captain of Chaos, Master of the Drums. He's got a hammer, he's got chains, he's got horns on his head. I don't know what's more metal than this guy. And also, he gives Thraximundar menace, which is pretty fantastic. So we want Thraximundar to get out and play. In order to do that, we gotta seriously ramp up. He costs 7 mana on his own. So you're gonna be casting him several times throughout the game. We're looking at 9, 11, possibly even 13 mana. The way to do that is not fully flavorful, but it certainly has functionality. And so we've got soul rings. I tried to make some of the mana rocks fit some of the form or the flavor. So we've got Talisman of Indulgence and Creativity, certainly no stranger to rock bands. Sure, you put some thought into your songs. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but it's a 2 mana rock. And so also we've got some sweet signets. I think of these as sort of like rings, chains, whatever kind of cool adornments and jewelry bands tend to wear. Just look at the Rolling Stones' Keith Richards. He's got more jewelry than, I don't know, a jewelry store. But also, another way that we look at possibly ramping up, Cursive Opulence. As the band gets more famous and rich, well, fans start throwing all their money at them. I want your t-shirt, I want your CD. And finally, we've got this really sweet enchantment. It's great in zombie decks, but you know what Thraximundar is? A zombie. So you can cast him for free, plus the commander tax throughout the game. Here we have it, the card draw suite for Thraximundar. A lot of them are going to be sorcery speed, a lot of them are enchantment based. In fact, Dig Through Time is the only one that is at instant speed. But man, some of these cards are sweet. And all of them are flavorfully chosen. So you've got things like Tormenting Voice, the Demonic Tutor that teaches them how to play their instruments, Dak Faden, the biggest record executive in the multiverse, ambition's cost, increasing ambition, and court of ambition. All things that like a band may go through in the time they rocket from nothing to stardom. So then we've got greed, of course that matters. Treasure cruise, windfall, all those things going together as the band lights up the stage, perhaps goes through some painful lessons, and then signs in blood on a dark deal. And dig through time in there because at one point, at least in the story of my deck, Thraximundar has to kind of like look back through history to find out what is going to be like the most awesome, incredible show. And so they find an idea to have like a rooftop show. And as we saw earlier, Rooftop Storm is in there, kind of signifying that piece. So it looks like I fibbed. Apparently there's more cards around the deck than I thought. So there's 3 more. We got Phyrexian Arena and these 2 Revelers. The Revelers representing sort of the fans of Thraximundar who are down in the mosh pit enjoying themselves. So that rounds out 17 cards total as far as card draw. Let's move to removal. Removal is admittedly light in this deck. I have some spot removal and very little like board sweeping effects. But here we go. We've got Hour of Glory, which is a sweet, sometimes you need to exile a thing. We've got Dirge Bat, which flavorfully fits with when Ozzy Osbourne bit the head off of a bat. Also, it gives Thraximundar flying, which is pretty sweet. Then we've got Blasphemous Act. What metal band hasn't done one of those? And then we've got Dreadbore, which also has some pretty incredible metal poster art because of the new Secret Lair that came out recently. And Curtain's Call, it's got Undaunted, it's instant speed. You can kind of remove 2 creatures that might be in the way of Thraximundar. You want to be very careful with where you aim these kind of things. And then finally, the second hour of the 2-hour show that started with Hour of Glory, Hour of Devastation. I love that it doesn't kill Thraximundar, and I also love that it does damage to Planeswalkers. Because I really don't like Planeswalkers, Thraximundar is not a fan. Finally, let's go ahead and get to some things that do help Thraximundar get in for those final punches. Distortion Strike, fitting because of the sound of distortion that metal bands often depend on, but also this one rebounds and lets Thraximundar be unblockable 2 turns in a row. We've got Disrupt Decorum, make all of your enemies fight each other, leaving them open to attack. Dulcet Sirens similarly can make target creatures attack other opponents and then leave them open for Thraximundar. As does Carter Doomscourge. You'll notice a theme. He hits the board, then all opponents have to attack each other, basically goading them where Thraximundar can then wreak havoc. Similarly, here's a land in case you need it, or on the side that it's on now, Song Mad Treachery allows you to gain control of somebody else's creature, and then maybe that's the final creature that was standing in the way. Here's a couple more sort of elements that let you interact with your opponents. Up top, we've got 3 counter spells, Rewind, Swan Song, and Syncopate. So use them wisely. You don't have a lot of them and they're not super optimal. Blatant Thievery can be a pretty powerful card depending on what kind of things you're able to steal. I also have some spell copy effects. I prefer to have these at like instant speed. You never know when you can kind of twist or use somebody else's powerful spell to your advantage. And so having one of these in your hand or maybe one on the board that kind of threatens to copy a powerful spell is kind of a cool effect I like. Then we have Shattering Spree. I like to imagine that just like many good rock bands, sometimes you just get crazy and you destroy all your own instruments. So for me, Shattering Spree is when Thraximundar goes off and starts to break and smash stuff. Then also, he gets on the mic and lets out one of the serious, terrifying howls from beyond. And this is the type of spell that if you have enough mana set up, you can just kind of end somebody in one swing, which I kind of like. And then finally, also to that effect, I like to imagine these as the instruments of the band. I wish I had more, to be honest, but these kind of fit one function because we've got Embercleave, which is straight up functional. It just gives Thraximundar trample and double strike and an instant speed. Then we've got form fulfilled with Unscythe, Killer of Kings. I don't know if there is a more metal artifact in Magic's history, but I'm pretty certain there is not. Because look at this thing. Like it's got lightning bolts, jagged edges, a crazy scythe. It's the Killer of Kings. I don't know what else to say about it. It makes other zombies. It's got a bunch of weird abilities on it that rarely come into play. But man, this thing looks cool and metal. So here are some stragglers for the Thraximundar deck. These are cards that have some flavor, they have some function, but let's talk about them. Seize the Day gives you multiple attack steps. It's got flashback. Not too bad. It's at sorcery speed, though, which is kind of annoying. We've got Banshee of the Dreadchoir and Vile Smasher the Fierce. These things give you incidental damage throughout the game and could potentially take a player or two out just through hitting really hard. We've got Sky Sovereign Console Flagship. It's not the greatest tour bus, but Thraximundar will work with it. It's certainly very fancy. It flies and it does a couple points of damage here and there, but I wish there was something a little bit more flavorful for a metal band. Maybe one day in Magic's future. Then we've got some other effects that I think are kind of funny and political or bizarre. Cursive Echoes is like a bad enchantment for 5 mana, but it makes this weird board state where people don't want to cast spells because everyone else will get a copy of that spell, which I think is kind of funny. And to be honest, you know, a Voltron Commander deck thrives on that sort of environment where people aren't doing things. They're just letting one big beefy man run around and punch people. So then we've got Havoc Festival, Cruel Entertainment, Captive Audience, Sower of Discord. These are cards that you could potentially use against the threat at the table and like kind of win some acclaim if you hit somebody with a captive audience, or you can pit people against each other, and Thrax always benefits from that sort of dynamic as well. Finally, we have some lands. Now there were some modal double face lands in the deck, or maybe there was only one, I can't remember, but these are kind of the venues where Thraximundar plays. So some of those fit that better than others. We've got like the Cephalid Coliseum, the Opal Palace, the Port of Carfell, Shinka the Bloodsoaked Keep. These are some kind of cool places a metal band might play. And then of course there's some like bizarre places that, you know, you just stretch your imagination a little bit and try to imagine Thraximundar the metal band playing in a crumbling necropolis or in a drowned catacomb. I mean, that sounds pretty metal to me. But I also, as far as functionality go, I have these 3 creature lands in the deck that allow you to punch when somebody's board wiped you or removed some of your creatures, because you don't have a whole lot of those in the deck, to be honest. And I love that these are sort of uncounterable creatures that can accrue a little bit of damage over time, and it might come into play at some point. So that is my Thraximundar deck. Well, to be fitting, I have a thrilling encore. This card could probably win a game on its own. Theoretically, if you imagine somebody board wiping the tables you've been at, there are probably a ton of awesome creatures out there. So if you're the only one with those creatures, man, what a switch, what a turn of the tides. But that's my Thraximundar deck, y'all. I appreciate you watching. Have a great time, and I hope it's been fun.